The breaking point. Clara Whitmore stood in the doorway of her own home, unseen, unheard, a ghost in the life she had built. The laughter drifting from Richard's study was not hers to share. It belonged to another woman, Marissa Lane, whose voice carried the syrupy confidence of youth. Clara had not meant to eavesdrop, but the door had been carelessly left ajar, as though her husband no longer cared if she discovered what had long been hidden in shadows. Her hands trembled as she clutched the frame, listening. Richard's tone was low, indulgent. "Clara doesn't understand anymore. She's too old for the world I live in. Too tired, too faded. Too old." The words landed like glass shattering in her chest. She had once been everything to him. At 25, she had left behind her ambitions to support his, nurturing his career, raising their home, smoothing the edges of his ruthless ambition. Now, at 42, she was dismissed like a faded garment, worn, reliable, but unworthy of display. Clara staggered back, her breath uneven. Rage battled sorrow inside her, but the sorrow won. She turned, moving down the hallway like a shadow pursued by silence. In the bedroom, she sat at the edge of the bed, staring at her reflection in the mirror. Her face carried fine lines earned through years of sacrifice, her body shaped by time and endurance rather than youth. She saw beauty still, though different, seasoned, not diminished. Yet Richard's words echoed louder than the truth she glimpsed. Too old. The slam of the study door startled her. Richard emerged with his tie loosened, carrying the smug weariness of a man who believed himself desired. He barely noticed her sitting there. "You're still up." His tone was casual, dismissive, as if nothing had fractured between them. Clara opened her mouth to speak, but the words caught. What could she say? That she had heard every confession, every insult? That she knew about Marissa Lane, the sleek, 30-year-old who accompanied him on business trips? Instead, she whispered, "Do you even see me anymore?" Richard frowned, annoyed by questions he deemed irrelevant. "Don't start tonight, Clara. It's late." He left her with silence, retreating into the sanctuary of his indifference. Something inside Clara collapsed then, not with the violence of a storm, but with the quiet certainty of a bridge giving way after years of wait. She realized she was invisible in her own marriage, her loyalty repaid with betrayal. She rose, grabbed her coat, and slipped out the door. The night air was sharp, carrying the scent of earth and distant pine. She drove without direction, guided only by the ache in her chest and the desperate need to escape the walls that had betrayed her trust. Miles blurred beneath her tires until the lights of the town fell away, replaced by the endless sprawl of countryside. The road narrowed, winding past barbed fences and wide fields brushed silver under the moonlight. When the car slowed, it was not by design, but by instinct. She pulled onto a dirt path where an old ranch house stood silhouetted against the horizon. Its porch light burned steady, a beacon in the darkness. Daniel Hayes was there, as he often was at such late hours, leaning against the rail with a book in hand. Rugged, broad-shouldered, his life carved by labor and solitude, Daniel embodied a kind of strength untouched by the pettiness of city life. He looked up as Clara's headlights cut across the yard. Recognition flickered in his gaze, followed by something gentler, concern, though unspoken. Clara stepped out, wrapping her coat tighter around her frame. I didn't mean to intrude." Daniel closed his book, setting it aside. "You're not intruding. Long drive for this time of night." His voice carried no judgment, only calm observation. That steadiness unsettled her more than anger would have. She hesitated, then said, "I just needed to get away." Daniel studied her for a moment, his eyes not lingering on her age or weariness, but resting on her as though she were whole, visible. He nodded once. "Coffee's hot inside, if you want it." Something in the simplicity of his words unraveled the tight knot in Clara's chest. She followed him toward the porch, unsure if she was stepping into refuge or temptation, only knowing she could not return to the silence of her house. The ranch smelled of hay and cedar, the air warmer than she expected. Daniel poured her a cup without fuss, sliding it across the counter. She accepted it with hands still trembling, grateful for the quiet. For the first time in years, someone looked at her without dismissal. She felt it in Daniel's steady gaze. an acknowledgement that she was not invisible. And as she sipped, the bitterness of betrayal lingered, but a new question began to stir. What if safety, perhaps even desire, could be found outside the walls of her broken marriage? The night deepened around them, and Clara realized her life had already shifted course. The spark in silence. The warmth of Daniel's kitchen wrapped around Clara like a blanket she hadn't realized she needed. The old ranch house creaked with age, but it carried no malice, no hidden lies. It smelled of cedar and black coffee, of earth and honest labor. She sat at the scarred wooden table, her hands curled around the steaming mug he had offered. Daniel moved with an ease that unsettled her, measured, quiet, neither pressing nor retreating. He was a man accustomed to silence, and yet the silence here was different from the hollow void she had endured with Richard. This silence was alive, waiting, allowing her to breathe. "You look like you've carried more than your share tonight," Daniel said finally, his voice low but not invasive. Clara stared into the dark swirl of coffee. She wanted to tell him everything, to unburden the years of betrayal that had just torn open, but words felt dangerous. Confession to a man like Daniel would not be shrugged off. It would be absorbed, weighed, honored. That scared her more than dismissal. "I just couldn't stay there anymore," she murmured. "Not tonight." Daniel's eyes, steady and unflinching, held hers for a long moment. Then he nodded, as though that was answer enough. He didn't press for details. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, letting the quiet fill the space again. Clara studied him through the haze of her exhaustion. His face bore lines, etched by sun and weather rather than stress or vanity. His hands, resting on the table, were rough from labor, not manicured like Richard's. Every part of him radiated solidity, as if the world could crumble and he would still stand rooted in place. The contrast was too much. Words slipped out before she could stop them. "Do you ever feel invisible?" Daniel's brow furrowed slightly. "Invisible, as though the person you've given everything to can't even see you anymore. Like you've been erased, but you're still standing there, screaming, and no one hears." Her voice cracked on the last word. He didn't look away. "I've felt that." His confession was simple, but the weight of it struck her. He didn't ask about her husband. He didn't need to. She saw it in his eyes. He had known abandonment too. "Who?" she whispered, not sure why she asked. Daniel's gaze drifted toward the window, the night pressing against the glass. "A woman I thought I'd spend my life with. She wanted more than this place could give her, more than I could give. She found someone richer, shinier. I let her go." The words were plain, but his voice carried a shadow of old pain. Clara felt it pierce her. Betrayal, rejection, though different in form, linked them in a thread of silent understanding. For the first time that night, Clara let herself meet his eyes without flinching. And there it was, unspoken but unmistakable recognition, not of youth or perfection, but of wounds that matched her own. The air shifted. It was not love, not yet. It was something more fragile, more dangerous. The first tug of forbidden desire. Clara's throat tightened. She set down her cup and rose, pacing toward the counter as if distance could quiet the rush beneath her skin. "I should go," she said, though the words lacked conviction. Daniel didn't move to stop her. He simply stood, his posture calm, though his gaze followed her with a gravity that pulled at her bones. "You're welcome here," he said quietly. "Anytime you need." The simplicity of it undid her. Richard had never once made her feel welcome in her own home. Yet here, in a place that was not hers, she felt more seen than she had in years. She hesitated at the door, her hand resting on the knob. Every instinct told her to run before this became something she couldn't contain. Yet when she turned, Daniel was still there, steady as stone, his presence offering not possession but safety. Her heart stumbled. For one reckless moment, she stepped closer instead of leaving. Her hand brushed against his as he reached to open the door for her. The contact was accidental, fleeting, but fire leapt from the touch, searing them both. Clara froze. Daniel's jaw tightened, though his eyes softened. Neither spoke. The silence carried everything: longing, restraint, fear. Finally, she pulled away, her breath shallow. "Good night," she whispered, retreating into the darkness outside. Daniel remained at the threshold, watching until her car disappeared down the dirt road. Alone in the night, Clara gripped the steering wheel, her pulse racing. She had not kissed him. She had not crossed the line. Yet the taste of what almost happened lingered stronger than any act could have. She knew, with a certainty that terrified her, that this was not the end. The line crossed. Morning light streamed through the curtains of Clara's bedroom, but its warmth fell hollow. Richard sat at the edge of the bed, tying his cufflinks with the same indifference he wore like armor. The faint scent of cologne clung to him, a scent she no longer recognized as hers. "Dinner tonight," he said flatly. "We'll be at the Harpers. Don't embarrass me." Clara swallowed hard. She wanted to scream, to hurl the truth of his infidelity into his face, but he offered her no opening, no vulnerability. He moved through their marriage as though she were an accessory, not a partner. "Richard," she whispered, her voice trembling, "do you even care?" He paused, his eyes meeting hers for a brief, sharp moment. Then he shrugged. "Care about what?" Her throat closed. He left without waiting for an answer. When the door shut behind him, Clara sat frozen, humiliation pressing on her chest until she could hardly breathe. He didn't deny the affair. He didn't even defend himself. He simply didn't care. That evening, Clara drove past the Harpers' dinner party without stopping. Her hands gripped the wheel until her knuckles blanched, the road leading her again to the only place that felt bearable, Daniel's ranch. The porch light glowed like before. He was there, working with the horses, his shirt rolled at the sleeves, sweat clinging to his brow. He looked up as her car crunched over gravel, and though surprise flickered across his face, it quickly softened into something steadier. "Clara," he said, setting the reins aside. "Rough day." She laughed bitterly, though tears shimmered in her eyes. "Every day is rough now." He guided her inside without another word. The kitchen smelled of wood smoke this time, fire crackling in the hearth. She collapsed into the chair she had occupied nights before, her hands trembling as though she were unraveling thread by thread. Finally, she broke. The words poured out. Her husband's rejection, his mistress, the hollow years of being unseen. Daniel listened without interruption, his gaze never leaving hers. He didn't try to explain away her pain, didn't tell her she deserved better. He simply held her words, steady and unshaken, as though they were sacred. Her voice faltered. "He said I was too old, Daniel. As if my worth expired with youth." Daniel leaned forward, his hands braced on the table. His eyes burned, not with pity but with conviction. "Too old? Clara, I see you. Every line, every scar, it's life lived. It's strength. You are not invisible." The sincerity in his voice pierced through years of dismissal. For the first time in longer than she could remember, Clara felt seen. Her breath caught. She rose, almost against her own will, and he rose with her. The space between them dissolved. "Daniel," she whispered, a warning laced with need. He shook his head slowly. "You don't have to explain. Not to me." Their hands met first, tentative, testing. Then his arms wrapped around her, solid and certain, and her defenses crumbled. She pressed her face into his chest, the steady beat of his heart grounding her even as desire surged. The kiss came like a storm breaking, at first hesitant, then consuming, years of repression spilling into a single moment. Clara clung to him as though she had been drowning and only now found air. Guilt flickered, Richard's face, his betrayal mirrored by her own, but it was drowned beneath the tidal wave of longing. This was not about revenge. It was about being alive, being wanted, being safe. Time blurred. The firelight danced across the walls as they surrendered to what had been building since that first night. Clara felt her age dissolve, not into youth, but into something deeper, confidence, desire reclaimed, power in being chosen. After, she lay in the quiet of the ranch house, her body still trembling, her heart both heavy and light. Guilt pressed at the edges, but it no longer defined her. She turned her head, meeting Daniel's steady gaze. "What have I done?" she whispered. He brushed a hand through her hair, his touch gentle. "You've remembered you're still alive." Her eyes burned with unshed tears. The truth of it was terrifying and liberating all at once. She had crossed the line, and nothing could return her to the woman she had been. Outside, the night pressed close, the world unchanged. But inside, Clara's life had shifted forever. Already safe, the morning after was not gentle. Clara woke to the chill of reality pressing against her skin. The fire in the hearth had burned down to embers, and the ranch house was quiet. Daniel sat at the table, coffee in hand, his posture calm, as though he had been waiting for her to decide what came next. Clara pulled the blanket around her shoulders, shame pricking at the edges of her thoughts. She had crossed a boundary that could not be undone. But when Daniel looked up, there was no accusation in his gaze, only steady acceptance. "You regret it?" His voice was careful, not accusing. Her lips parted, then closed again. The answer wasn't simple. "No," she whispered. "I regret the years I let myself disappear. But this, being here with you know." The weight in her chest eased at the truth. Later that day, Clara returned home, bracing herself for the confrontation she had delayed too long. Richard was waiting, his expression sharp, as though he had anticipated her absence. "Where were you last night?" he demanded. Clara's hands trembled, but her voice was steady. "Out, with someone who actually sees me." Richard's face twisted. "You think this makes you better than me? You're pathetic, Clara, running to some rancher like a desperate woman clinging to her youth." The words struck, but they no longer shattered. Clara straightened her shoulders. "You lost the right to call me desperate the moment you took Marissa into our bed." For the first time, Richard faltered. His arrogance cracked, though only for an instant. Then he scoffed, brushing past her, muttering, "Enjoy your fantasy." Clara stood rooted in the silence he left behind. She realized, with a clarity that stunned her, that she no longer feared his disdain. He had no power left to wound her. The following week confirmed it. Whispers trickled through town. Richard flaunting Marissa openly now, trying to humiliate Clara with his new prize. At a dinner gathering, he made a pointed remark about her lonely drives to the country, smirking as laughter rippled among the shallow audience. But before Clara could respond, a voice cut through the room. "Enough." Daniel stepped forward, his presence commanding without force. His gaze locked on Richard, steady and unflinching. "You think mocking her makes you strong? It only shows how small you are." The room fell silent. Clara's breath caught as Daniel's words reverberated. For the first time, someone had defended her not with whispers or pity, but with unshakable certainty. Richard sputtered, caught off guard, but Clara didn't wait for his retort. She placed her hand on Daniel's arm, grounding herself in his steadiness. Then she faced the room. "I spent years invisible in a marriage built on lies," she said, her voice clear. "I won't be invisible anymore." Gasps fluttered, but Clara no longer cared. The chains of silence were gone. That night, back at the ranch, Clara stood on the porch beside Daniel. The fields stretched endlessly before them, silver under the moonlight. She drew in a breath of crisp air, her heart lighter than it had been in years. "Take me home, Daniel," she whispered, her voice breaking with vulnerability. He turned to her, his eyes warm, unwavering. "Clara, you're already home." The words settled over her like a promise, like absolution. For once, she believed them. She leaned against him, the steady rhythm of his presence grounding her in the truth she had fought so long to deny. Safety was not found in youth or in a husband's approval, but in being seen, cherished, chosen. The night closed around them, quiet but full of possibility. Clara's life had been rewritten, not by betrayal, not even by infidelity, but by the courage to claim herself at last.